In the past 24 hours, justice has been served. George Zimmerman acquitted of the allegations of second-degree murder charges brought against him by the state in the Trayvon Martin vs. Zimmerman case. Now, were mistakes made? Did George Zimmerman make a mistake that night following Trayvon? I would argue yes. But that still doesn't change the fact that justice was served over the past 24 hours with the acquittal of George Zimmerman, which was the opinion of 6 jurors, 6 women, 5 white, and 1 African American, after being presented with the evidence from eyewitness accounts and eyewitnesses like John Good that corroborated the story. The key hard evidence of the trial, that Trayvon Martin was straddling Zimmerman, was on top of him in an attack position before George Zimmerman, in an act of self-defense after his head being banged into the concrete and a bloody nose, shot the tragic, fatal blow into the heart of Trayvon Martin. A young man, not a boy, a young man. Notice how the mainstream media wanted to portray him as a boy. Although he has a series and had a series of his own problems at school, had allegedly attacked a bus driver, put gang-related signs out on his Twitter feed, was a burglar, had been ripping people off at school, and had been suspended, and was actually serving a suspension the day that he was shot. And also, another witness, phone witness, a friend of Trayvon who was on the phone moments before the incident, said and corroborated the fact to the jury and to the American people that Trayvon Martin called George Zimmerman a white-ass cracker. Yeah, that's right, a white-ass cracker. You don't see Jesse Jackson and Reverend Al Sharpton and this other guy with the last name Jealous that I find odd, angry about that, do you? You don't see them calling for a charge in Washington and a formal investigation of those comments, do you? Why is that? Why don't we have that from those people? You know, they're calling for a federal investigation now. President Barack Obama has come out and he says, you know what, there should be calm. There's no reason to riot. For the first time ever, I actually think I agree with the president. I disagreed with the fact that he likened Trayvon as if it was his own son, inherently convicting George Zimmerman before the trial had even begun. How anti-American and anti-constitutional is that? Get your big fat nose out of the business of our judicial system, Mr. President. And when we did that, when the American people and the people of the world demanded a trial, demanded that Zimmerman be arrested, and demanded that the people decide, which is exactly what happened, now they're angry that the people have made that decision. That they have acquitted 6 jurors, 6 women, 5 Caucasian, 1 African American, have acquitted George Zimmerman of the second-degree murder charge. Which personally, and this is not me toting myself or saying I get everything right, predicted accurately, hitting the nail on the head weeks before the actual acquittal. Because they could not prove unreasonable, without a shadow of an unreasonable doubt, that George Zimmerman killed in a hateful, spiteful way because he had it out for humanity, but specifically, as Reverend Jesse Jackson and Al Sharpton want you to believe, specifically out for black people. Now, of course, they propagandized you through the mainstream media, made you believe that George Zimmerman was actually white, that he was Caucasian, even though he identifies himself as Hispanic, and clearly, if you look at his picture, isn't a Caucasian in the traditional sense. You know what's amazing about this is I don't even think the case really is about race, although it's been made out to be. It's a case of a series of events, unfortunate, tragic events, and my heart goes out to the family of Trayvon Martin, and I pray for his family, what they must be going through right now. But a series and confluence of tragic events that led to the death of a young man. Led to, specifically, the death of Trayvon Martin. People like Beyonce have to do a moment of silence because they got to get their big fat Hollywood nose in it after snorting their big cocaine hit and, you know, wearing their Illuminati t-shirt. But you have to ask yourself the question, why aren't there other cases like this that have been blown out of proportion? Why aren't we talking about, for example, and I want you to look up the numbers yourself. How many black-on-black violent-related crimes and gun crimes have occurred in the city streets of Chicago over the past year? I'm not even going to give you the number. You look it up yourself. Google it and put it in the description box below. How many black kids from black-on-black violence, gang violence, have died over the last year in 2012 and this year so far in 2013? Put that number down. Why isn't President Barack Obama likening himself to all those murdered kids? All those murdered, run-down African Americans killing each other in the streets of his hometown. Why? That's a question you need to investigate yourself. You know, Reverend Jesse Jackson, Al Sharpton, and the American people, that most of which are uneducated, by the way, just want to play hook, line, and sinker into Obama's race war. And the race card that he's been playing like a whistle for the past several months now since this began. And I've covered this extensively with several videos. Please look up our archives. And called it with a nail on the head that George Zimmerman would be acquitted. Why are they blowing this specific case out of proportion? And now asking for a federal investigation to try George Zimmerman on the same charges that he just was acquitted for and by a jury of his peers in a court of law, of which the jurors were the ones that received the evidence. They looked at the evidence and cleared it. But the people still want a noose around George Zimmerman's neck. This is about divide and conquer mentality, folks. This has been the agenda for the very beginning. While you're focused on the race war and racism and Trayvon Martin and George Zimmerman, a tragedy, nonetheless, absolutely a tragedy. Again, I pray for both families at this point. I pray for Trayvon Martin's parents and the incredible loss that they must be going through. Brings tears to my eyes. It really does. But while you're focused on this, while you're focused on the race card that Obama loves to play, blow that little race card whistle, he's launching a very aggressive, violent war in Syria right now, as we speak. Just like he did in Libya, bypassing Congress and the War Powers Act of 1973 a few months ago, having murdered Muammar Gaddafi and helping to destabilize much of that region. Why aren't the American people angry about the young men, women, boys, and girls dying overseas in these useless wars? Why aren't the American people, Reverend Al Sharpton and Jesse Jackson, demanding a federal investigation of the bank bailouts and the raping of the American Constitution here in the United States? The National Defense Authorization Act, courtesy of yours truly, President Barack Obama. We have people being killed in the streets, journalists that even the mainstream media says were open hits in assassinations. People like Michael Hastings that people are forgetting about, not talking about, didn't even know it actually happened. But instead, we're focused on the race card. We're focused on the race issue. And they liken it to the Rodney King trial, which to me is laughable. You know, I was actually pretty young when the Rodney King event happened, but they look like completely two different cases to me. Two different, distinct cases. In the Rodney King case, we had a specific video, evidence of Rodney King getting the crap beat out of him, getting the living daylights beat out of him. That was clearly, in my opinion, and is clearly, in my opinion, wrong. But in the case of Zimmerman and Trayvon Martin, we have an eyewitness account and other corroborating evidence that says Trayvon Martin was the one that was the aggressor and was the attacker. And we have the photographic evidence to prove it. And George Zimmerman has the right to remain silent under a court of law, in a court of law, as is his constitutional right here in the United States of America. Yet the people in America just don't like America anymore. They don't like that Constitution. They don't like that Bill of Rights, which is exactly why President Barack Obama is putting his nose in other people's business. Create a distraction. Keep your eye on this hand while he's moving this hand in Syria. While there's a backdrop of scandal after scandal, whether or not it's Benghazi, it's the NSA, it's Edward Snowden, it's Michael Hastings, it's the latest stepping down of Big Sis at the Homeland Security Department. Scandal after scandal. Put the ones down in the description box I missed. There's too many to count. This video would be 25 minutes long, me just going through the list. Again, why aren't the American people demanding, why isn't Reverend Al Sharpton, Jesse Jackson, and the people of America angry, pissed off, and demanding a formal federal investigation of the bank bailouts and the raping and pillaging of America in 2008? Why aren't people like John Corzine serving time in federal palmy-in-the-ass prison? Or maybe being hung in the streets like we used to do in the old days? Why isn't that happening? Why aren't the Jamie Dimons of Chase Bank and the John Thanes of Merrill Lynch facing the fire of the American people? Why? Because it's not the agenda. It's not Obama's agenda, it's not the people that control him's agenda, and it's not the agenda of the New World Order. And that's why they've created a smoke screen to distract you from the real truth. Pay attention, America. Pay attention to what's happening in the Middle East right now. Pay attention to Syria. Pay attention to these scandals. Pay attention to the whacking of good, awesome, amazing journalists like Michael Hastings that, in my opinion, were killed and murdered via the National Defense Authorization Act instituted by yours truly, President Barack Hussein Obama. Is that about racism? Or is that about severe injustice and an upfront and personal close counterattack on the U.S. Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and everything that this country stands for? We need to place our anger, we need to place our rage in the right place, America, and we need to focus it. We need to focus it where it matters. I'll let the American people decide where it counts. I'm Christopher Green. You've been watching Green Wave TV, alternative media television, and I just delivered the Daily Wave. Hard hitting and in your face.